The smell of rendered fat hung thick in the air as Priscilla Porter stirred the enormous cast iron kettle behind the boarding house. Her sleeves rolled up past her elbows despite the October chill of 1878. She had learned 3 months ago that desperation made excellent motivation, and now her hands moved with practiced efficiency through work that would have disgusted her former self. The woman she had been when she arrived in Portland, Oregon, with her husband would never have believed she would end up here, alone and stirring animal fat in a yard that smelled like a slaughterhouse. Her husband Thomas had died of pneumonia 6 weeks after they had made the journey west, leaving her with nothing but debts to the boarding house keeper and a trunk full of worthless belongings. Mrs. Henderson had been kind enough not to throw her into the street, but kindness only extended so far. Priscilla needed to earn her keep, and when she had seen the butcher throwing away perfectly good tallow, something had clicked in her mind. Her grandmother had made soap on the farm back in Pennsylvania, and Priscilla had watched her enough times to remember the basics. The first batch had been terrible, too soft and smelling rancid. The second had been better. By the 5th batch, she had soap that actually cleaned and did not smell like death. Mrs. Henderson had let her sell bars to the other boarders, and word had spread. Now Priscilla spent every spare moment rendering tallow, mixing lye, pouring molds, and cutting bars. Her hands were raw and her back ached constantly, but the small pile of coins hidden in her room grew steadily larger. She was so focused on achieving the right temperature that she did not hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across her kettle. "That smells better than I expected," a deep voice said, and Priscilla looked up to find a man standing at the edge of her work area. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. He wore dusty work clothes and boots that had seen hard use, and there was something about the easy way he stood that suggested he was comfortable in his own skin. "Most people say it smells terrible," Priscilla replied, pushing a strand of honey-colored hair back from her face with the back of her wrist. She was acutely aware that she probably looked frightful, her simple brown dress stained and her face flushed from the heat. "I have smelled worse." He smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Priscilla's breath catch slightly. "I am Dominic Garrett. I am renting a room here, just moved in today. Priscilla Porter." She kept stirring, though her attention was divided now. "Welcome to Henderson's." "Thank you. Mrs. Henderson mentioned you make soap. I would like to buy some if you have any ready." "I have some inside, curing on the shelf. How many bars do you need?" However many a man going through needs when he is trying to wash away months of trail dust. Dominic moved closer, genuinely interested in her process. "How did you learn to do this?" Priscilla found herself explaining about her grandmother, about the first terrible batches, about slowly teaching herself to get it right. Dominic listened with an attention that felt rare and precious. Most people, especially men, dismissed women's work as uninteresting, but he asked questions that showed he was actually thinking about what she was doing. "That takes real skill," he said when she finished, "and business sense. You saw an opportunity and taught yourself a trade." "I saw an opportunity not to starve," Priscilla corrected, but she felt a flush of pleasure at his words. When was the last time anyone had complimented her intelligence? Sometimes that is the best motivation. There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience. "I will let you get back to your work. Could I buy those bars from you later this evening? Of course. Just find me after dinner." He tipped his head in acknowledgement and walked away, and Priscilla realized she was smiling as she turned back to her kettle. Then she caught herself. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for another man. She had work to do and a goal to achieve. She had calculated that if she could keep up her current production and sales, in 2 years she might have enough money to purchase a small plot of land outside town. Land meant security, meant never having to depend on anyone else's charity again. A handsome cowboy with kind eyes was just a distraction. But that evening, when Dominic found her in the boarding house parlor and paid her for 6 bars of soap without trying to negotiate the price down, and then spent an hour talking with her about her plans for expanding her business, Priscilla found her resolve weakening. He told her about his own situation, about how he had been working as a ranch hand for the past 5 years, saving every penny he could. He had a goal too, he said. He wanted to buy his own place, not to ranch but to open a saloon. A saloon. Priscilla could not keep the surprise from her voice. "I know it does not sound respectable," Dominic said with a self-deprecating grin, "but I have been thinking about it for years. A good saloon, run properly, can be the heart of a community. Somewhere men can gather after hard work, have a drink, hear the news, feel part of something. I do not want to run some dirty hole where men get into fights every night. I want a real establishment." "That takes more than just money," Priscilla said thoughtfully. "You would need to understand people, know how to manage difficult situations. I have been breaking up fights and talking down angry drunks for 5 years. The saloons I have been in have taught me exactly what not to do." He leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident. "I have been keeping notes, actually. Everything I would do differently." They talked until Mrs. Henderson came in to pointedly blow out most of the lamps, a signal that respectable people should be in their own rooms. Priscilla went to bed that night with her mind full of thoughts that had nothing to do with soap or tallow or lye. Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Dominic worked during the day at a freight company, loading and unloading wagons. Priscilla made her soap, sold it door to door in the afternoons, and spent her evenings either making more inventory or, increasingly, talking with Dominic. He started helping her with the heavy work, hauling water and lifting the big kettles, waving off her protests that he did not have to. "I want to," he said simply. "Besides, you are teaching me about running a business. This is fair trade." It was true that their conversations had evolved. Priscilla found herself explaining how she tracked her expenses and income, how she had figured out her pricing to ensure a profit while still being competitive with the general store. Dominic absorbed it all like a sponge, asking smart questions and making observations that showed he was thinking several steps ahead. "You should sell to the mercantile," he said one evening in late November as they worked together in the cold, their breath making clouds in the air. "You could make larger batches, negotiate a wholesale price. You would make less per bar but sell more volume. Mr. Carlson at the mercantile already sells soap shipped from San Francisco," Priscilla pointed out. "Why would he buy mine?" "Because yours is better and you are local. No shipping costs, no waiting for deliveries. You could undercut the San Francisco price and still make more than you do now." Dominic paused in his stirring. "You should at least talk to him." Priscilla bit her lip, considering. The idea terrified her. Selling door to housewives was one thing. Negotiating with a businessman was another entirely. But Dominic was right about the potential. "Come with me," she asked, then felt foolish. "I mean, if you have time, you have a better head for this sort of negotiation." "I would be honored," Dominic said, and the warmth in his eyes made her feel like she had asked him something far more significant than to accompany her to the mercantile. 2 days later, they walked together to Carlson's mercantile. Priscilla wore her best dress, a dark blue wool that had been her second best when Thomas was alive, but was now her finest garment. Dominic had clearly made an effort too, his hair neatly combed and his shirt clean and pressed. Mr. Carlson was a shrewd-eyed man in his 50s who listened to Priscilla's pitch with an expression that gave nothing away. She had brought samples, and she forced herself to speak confidently about her product's quality, her reliable production capacity, and her proposed pricing. When she finished, Carlson picked up one of the bars and examined it closely. "It is good soap," he admitted. "Better than what I have been getting, truthfully. Those San Francisco people have been raising their prices every 6 months and the quality has been going down." He set the bar down. "But I have a contract with them through February." Priscilla's heart sank, but before she could respond, Dominic spoke up. "So you could start with Mrs. Porter in March," he said smoothly. "That gives her time to build up inventory for a strong opening order. And it gives you time to see that she is reliable. She could supply you with a small order now, maybe 24 bars, so your customers can try it. If they like it as much as I think they will, you will be eager to make her your main supplier come spring." Carlson's eyes sharpened with interest. "You make a good point, young man. You have a silver tongue there." "I just recognize quality when I see it," Dominic replied, "both in soap and in business partners." In the end, Carlson agreed to the trial order and to a larger contract starting in March if the soap sold well. As Priscilla and Dominic walked back to the boarding house, she found herself laughing with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. "I cannot believe you convinced him," she said. "That suggestion about the trial order was brilliant. You did the convincing. You and your soap." Dominic caught her hand, and even through her glove she felt the warmth of his touch. "I just helped a little." They stopped walking, suddenly aware that they were standing very close together on the boardwalk. Priscilla looked up at Dominic's face and saw her own feelings reflected there, attraction and affection and something deeper that was just beginning to take root. "Dominic," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know," he said quietly. "I know you are not looking for this. I know you have goals and plans and you need to focus on building your business. I know all of that, Priscilla. But I need you to know that I am not going anywhere. I am going to be here, helping you, being your friend, for as long as you will let me. And if someday you decide you might want more than friendship, I will be here for that too." Priscilla's throat tightened with emotion. "I am not sure I know how to do this," she whispered. "I was married for 3 years, but I am not sure Thomas and I ever really knew each other. Not like this. You have seen me at my worst, smelling like tallow with my hair falling down, and you still want to be here." "Especially then," Dominic said. "That is when you are most yourself, strong and determined and not caring what anyone thinks because you are too busy working toward your dreams." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "You are remarkable, Priscilla." She could not help it. She started crying, right there on the main street of Portland, and Dominic pulled her into his arms and held her while she soaked his shirt with tears she had been holding back for months. All the fear and exhaustion and loneliness came pouring out, and he just held her, one hand stroking her back, murmuring that it was all right, that she was safe. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed and sniffling, he handed her a handkerchief and smiled at her with such tenderness that she nearly started crying again. "I think I would like to try," she said. "The more than friendship part, if you are willing to be patient with me." "I have all the patience in the world," Dominic promised. They started courting properly after that, though their courtship looked different from most. They still worked together on her soap business, but now Dominic would steal kisses when no one was looking, or hold her hand as they walked to make deliveries. He started sitting with her at meals in the boarding house, and the other residents began treating them as a couple. Mrs. Henderson gave Priscilla a knowing look, but said nothing, which was as close to approval as the stern woman ever gave. December brought snow and harder working conditions. Priscilla's hands cracked and bled from the combination of cold, lie, and constant work. Dominic bought her a pair of sturdy gloves and a tin of salve, insisting she take better care of herself. "Your hands are your livelihood," he said firmly. "You cannot make soap if you injure yourself permanently." He was right, though Priscilla chafed at taking time for self-care when she could be working. But she forced herself to use the salve every night and to wear the gloves when she could. Slowly, her hands began to heal. Christmas came, and Dominic gave her a small leather-bound ledger book for tracking her accounts. She gave him a set of carved wooden buttons she had commissioned from an old Norwegian carpenter who lived in the boarding house. They were simple but elegant, exactly right for the kind of respectable saloon owner Dominic wanted to become. "They are perfect," he said, and kissed her right there in the parlor in front of everyone. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat disapprovingly, but her eyes were soft. The trial soap sold out in Carlson's Mercantile within 2 weeks. Priscilla could barely keep up with making enough bars for her regular customers, while also trying to build inventory for the March contract. Dominic spent every evening helping her, even though he was exhausted from his own work. Sometimes she would look up from her stirring to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "What are you thinking?" she asked one such evening in January. "That I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "That I know it is too soon to say it, but it is true anyway. That I want to build a life with you, Priscilla. Your dreams and my dreams, all tangled together." Priscilla set down her stirring paddle and crossed to him, taking his face in her still damp hands. "I am falling in love with you too," she said. "I did not think I would ever feel this way. I did not think I could trust anyone again after Thomas died and I realized how alone I really was. But you make me feel safe. You make me feel seen." They kissed, long and sweet, until the soap nearly boiled over and they had to scramble to rescue it, laughing breathlessly. In February, Dominic came home from work with news that made Priscilla's breath stop. "There is a saloon for sale," he said, his eyes bright with excitement and fear. "The owner died, and his widow wants to sell quickly so she can move back east to live with her daughter. It is on 3rd Street, good location, solid building. She is asking $800. "You have that much?" Priscilla asked. Dominic's expression fell slightly. "I have 600 saved. I could maybe borrow the rest, but I would be starting out in debt, and that is risky." Priscilla thought about her own savings, the money she had been carefully hoarding for her land. She had almost $400 now, more than she had ever dreamed of having. If she gave Dominic $200, she would still have enough to buy land, just not as much or as soon. But even as she thought it, she knew she was going to do it, because Dominic's dream was important too, and because she loved him, and because some investments were worth the risk. "I will lend you $200, she said, "at a fair interest rate, proper business terms. You can pay me back as the saloon starts earning." Dominic stared at her. "Priscilla, that is your land money. I cannot take that from you. You are not taking it. I am investing it, in you, in us." She reached for his hands. "We are building our futures together now, remember. Your dreams and mine, all tangled up. If this fails," he said hoarsely, "if the saloon does not work, I will pay you back every penny even if it takes me the rest of my life." "It will not fail," Priscilla said with more confidence than she felt. "You are going to make it work, because you are smart and determined and you understand what people need, and I am going to help you." The sale went through in early March. Dominic bought the saloon and immediately renamed it the Garrett House, wanting it to sound more like a respectable establishment than a rough frontier saloon. The previous owner had let it get run down, and Dominic spent every spare moment cleaning, repairing, and reorganizing. Priscilla helped when she could. though she was frantically busy with her own business. Carlson's mercantile contract had started, and she was making more soap than ever. She had to hire one of the other boarding house residents, a young widow named Sarah, to help with the cutting and wrapping. The work was exhausting but profitable. Her savings were growing again, even after the loan to Dominic. The Garrett house opened in April with a simple sign and a clean, well-lit interior that looked nothing like the dingy establishment it had been. Dominic did not serve cheap rot-gut whiskey but decent liquor at fair prices. He kept the place clean, broke up fights before they started with a combination of diplomacy and his considerable physical presence, and slowly built a reputation as a saloon owner who ran a respectable establishment. But money was tight those first months. Some nights Dominic barely had 10 customers. He started looking haggard, the worry lines deepening around his eyes. "Maybe I made a mistake," he admitted to Priscilla one evening in May. They were sitting in the empty saloon after closing, and he looked defeated. "Maybe I was a fool to think I could do this." "You are not a fool," Priscilla said firmly. "You are building something, and that takes time. How long did it take me to make soap that did not smell rancid? How many doors did I knock on before people started buying regularly?" She took his hand. "You have to be patient with yourself the way you were patient with me. What if I cannot pay you back?" The question seemed to pain him. "What if I fail and take your dreams down with me?" "Then we will figure out something else," Priscilla said. "Together. That is what people who love each other do." It was the first time either of them had said the word love directly without qualifiers. Dominic's eyes widened, and then he was pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of all his fears and hopes. "Marry me," he said against her lips. "I know I am asking when I have almost nothing to offer you, when I am barely keeping my business alive, but marry me anyway, Priscilla. Let us build our lives together officially. Let us be partners in every way." Priscilla pulled back far enough to look into his eyes. She thought about how he had helped her without asking for anything in return, how he had believed in her when she barely believed in herself, how he had held her when she cried and celebrated every small victory as if it were a grand triumph. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They married in June in a simple ceremony at the small church Priscilla had been attending. Sarah and another soap worker stood up with Priscilla, while Dominic asked his boss from the freight company and the Norwegian carpenter to be his witnesses. Mrs. Henderson came and sniffed throughout the ceremony, though whether from disapproval or emotion was unclear. They spent their wedding night in Dominic's small room above the saloon. It was cramped and sparse, but Priscilla did not care. She was in her husband's arms, and this time it felt completely different from her first marriage. Thomas had been a stranger who remained a stranger. Dominic was her best friend, her business partner, the person who knew her better than anyone else in the world. "I love you," he whispered as he carefully unpinned her hair. "I love your strength and your stubborn determination, and the way you refuse to give up even when everything seems impossible." "I love you too," Priscilla replied, helping him with the buttons on his shirt. "I love how you see the best in people, how you dream big but work hard to make those dreams real, how you make me laugh even on my worst days." They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, Priscilla felt a contentment she had never known before. This was what marriage was supposed to be, she thought. Partnership and passion and profound friendship all woven together. The next morning, Priscilla moved her few belongings into Dominic's room, and they began their life together properly. She still spent her days making soap, though now she did it in the saloon's back room where Dominic had set up a proper workspace for her. He had used some of his scarce capital to buy her a better kettle and proper molds, insisting it was an investment in their shared future. The saloon was still struggling, though. By July, Dominic was looking genuinely worried. He had maybe a dozen regular customers, not enough to cover his expenses. Priscilla watched him trying to hide his stress and decided to take action. She started baking bread and simple pastries in the saloon's kitchen and offering them free to customers. The smell drew people in, and the food kept them there longer. She also suggested that Dominic start serving coffee in the mornings, turning the saloon into a place where working men could stop before their shifts for a hot drink and a bite to eat. It might seem strange, a saloon serving coffee, Dominic said doubtfully. Why? You want this to be the heart of the community, right? Communities need gathering places at all times of day, not just when men want a drink. Priscilla poured him a cup of the strong coffee she had just brewed. Try it. What do you have to lose? Dominic tried it. Within 2 weeks, he had a steady stream of morning customers. Many of them came back in the evenings for a drink, now that the Garrett house felt familiar and welcoming. Word spread that Garrett's wife made the best bread in Portland, and that Garrett himself was a fair man who kept an orderly establishment. By August, the saloon was turning a real profit. Not a fortune, but enough that Dominic could breathe easier. He started making payments to Priscilla on her loan, insisting on it even though she told him he should wait until the business was more stable. A debt is a debt, he said firmly, and I pay my debts, especially to my wife. Priscilla's soap business continued to thrive. Carlson's Mercantile was ordering more every month, and she had started supplying 2 other stores as well. She hired another helper, and then another. By fall, she had 4 women working for her, all widows or single mothers who needed the income. She paid them fairly and treated them well, remembering what it had been like to be desperate and alone. The money was piling up now, faster than Priscilla had ever imagined possible. She kept meticulous records in the ledger Dominic had given her, tracking every penny. By her calculations, she would have enough to buy land by spring, but something had shifted in her thinking. The land had represented security and independence, not having to rely on anyone else, but she was not alone anymore. She had Dominic, and she had her workers who depended on her, and she had customers who trusted her product. She was already part of a community, already building something lasting. One evening in October, exactly a year after that first day when Dominic had appeared by her soap kettle, she sat him down at one of the saloon tables and spread out her ledger. I have been thinking, she said, about the land, about what I really want. Dominic looked wary. All right. What if, instead of buying land for just me, we bought land for both of us? A real property where we could build a house, where I could have a proper soap workshop, where maybe eventually we could expand your business too. She looked up at him. I know the Garrett house is doing well, but you have mentioned wanting to grow, maybe add a small hotel upstairs someday. Priscilla, that would take a lot more money than what you have saved for your land, Dominic protested. I would not ask you to give up your dream for mine. It is not giving up my dream, it is changing it, making it bigger, making it ours. She reached across the table for his hand. I trust you, Dominic, I trust us. Let us build something together. Dominic looked down at their joined hands, and when he looked up, his eyes were suspiciously bright. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, he said roughly. Yes, let us do this together. They spent the next several months looking at properties and planning. Priscilla wanted space for a real soap manufactory with proper ventilation and room for expansion. Dominic wanted to be close enough to town that customers could easily reach them, but not so close that property was prohibitively expensive. They finally found a plot on the outskirts of Portland that met both their needs. 5 acres with a small existing building that could be converted to a workshop, and enough space to build both a house and, eventually, a larger establishment than the Garrett house. The sale went through in March of 1880, almost 2 years after Dominic had bought his first saloon. They used Priscilla's savings for the down payment and took out a loan for the rest, carefully calculated so they could afford the payments without overextending. Building took time and money. They hired a crew to construct a proper house, simple but solid, with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen. While that was being built, Dominic was overseeing the construction of what he was calling Garrett's Grand Saloon and Hotel. It would have the saloon on the ground floor and 6 rooms upstairs for rent. Priscilla focused on her soap manufactory. She wanted something that looked professional, that could handle much larger production volumes. She ordered proper equipment from San Francisco, including a mechanical press that would speed up the production process dramatically. They moved into the house in July, giddy with the novelty of having space that belonged only to them. Priscilla had a real kitchen with a proper stove, and Dominic had a small office where he could do paperwork. They had a bedroom large enough for an actual bed frame instead of just a mattress, and 2 extra rooms they were not sure yet what to do with. Guest rooms, Priscilla suggested. Or maybe one could be a nursery eventually. They had not talked much about children yet, both too focused on building their businesses, but Dominic's face lit up at the suggestion. "You want children?" he asked. "I think so. Someday when we are a little more settled." Priscilla smiled. "What about you?" "I would love to have children with you," Dominic said softly. "A whole house full if you are willing." They made love that night in their new house, in their new bed, with a desperate hunger that spoke of new possibilities opening up before them. Priscilla felt like her life had transformed completely from that cold October day when she had been alone and desperate, stirring tallow behind a boarding house. She had security now, and purpose, and most importantly, she had love. The manufactory opened in August, and within a month, Priscilla was producing 10 times as much soap as she had made in her best month working alone. She had 8 women working for her now, and she was supplying stores as far away as Salem. She started experimenting with different scents and formulations, creating specialty soaps with lavender or rose or peppermint. Those sold for higher prices and gave her business an upscale reputation. Garrett's Grand Saloon and Hotel opened in September. It was elegant by frontier standards, with a long polished bar, good lighting, and upstairs rooms that were clean and comfortable. Dominic hired a man to work the bar during the day so he could focus on the business side of things, and a woman to keep the hotel rooms clean and manage that side of operations. The grand opening was packed. It seemed like half of Portland turned up to see what Dominic Garrett had built. Priscilla stayed by his side, wearing a new dress she had made for the occasion, forest green silk that made her eyes look even brighter. She watched Dominic move through the crowd, shaking hands and thanking people for coming, and she felt a fierce pride in what he had accomplished. "You did it," she whispered to him during a rare quiet moment. "You made your dream real." "We did it," Dominic corrected. "None of this would have happened without you, without your faith in me, without your investment. You are my partner in every way, Priscilla." The business thrived from the start. The hotel rooms were almost always full, and the saloon had steady traffic from morning coffee service through late-night drinks. Dominic started being able to pay back Priscilla's loan in larger chunks, though she kept trying to tell him to slow down and keep more capital in the business. "I want this debt cleared," he insisted. "I want us starting completely fresh, no obligations between us except the ones we choose." By December, he had paid her back completely, with interest calculated at a fair rate. Priscilla took the money and immediately reinvested half of it into buying the building in town where the Garrett house still operated. She gave it to Dominic as a Christmas gift, the deed wrapped in plain brown paper. "Now you own both locations outright," she said as he stared at the deed in shock. "No rent, no worries about a landlord selling out from under you. It is yours." Dominic set the deed down carefully and pulled his wife into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her blush even though they were alone in their own home. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured against her hair. "How did I deserve you?" "You did not have to deserve me," Priscilla said. "You just had to see me. Really see me, not what I used to be or what I might become, but who I actually am. You were the first person who ever did that." That night, they lay in bed and made lists of all the things they wanted to do next. Expand Priscilla's soap line into other products, maybe lotion and perfume. Add more hotel rooms. Eventually buy more land. Save money for their children's futures whenever those children arrived. "We should do something for the community too," Priscilla said thoughtfully. "We have been so fortunate. We should find ways to help others the way people helped us." Dominic agreed immediately. They decided to start by offering jobs to people who most needed them, particularly women in difficult circumstances. Priscilla was already doing that with her manufactory, and Dominic started doing the same at the saloon and hotel, hiring people that others might overlook because they were the wrong age or had the wrong background. 1881 brought more growth. Priscilla's soap was now being shipped to stores throughout Oregon and into Washington Territory. She had to expand her manufactory, building an addition and hiring more workers. She was employing 15 women now, and she took her responsibility to them seriously. When one of her workers got sick, Priscilla paid for the doctor and held her job open until she recovered. When another worker's child needed shoes, Priscilla quietly slipped her an advance on her wages with no interest and flexible payback terms. "You are too soft," Dominic teased her gently one evening when she told him about the latest case. "I am not soft. I am practical," Priscilla corrected. "A worker who knows she will be taken care of is a loyal worker who does good work and does not leave for a competitor. Besides, it is the right thing to do. You know what it is like to struggle, so do I. Why would we not help when we can?" Dominic kissed her forehead. "This is why I love you. Your heart is as smart as your head." By the summer of 1881, they were well established and financially secure. Priscilla was 26 now, Dominic was 28, and they started seriously discussing starting a family. "I think I am ready," Priscilla said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I think the business is stable enough that I could step back a little if I needed to." "I am more than ready," Dominic replied. "I have been ready since the day we married." Priscilla discovered she was pregnant in August. She told Dominic over dinner, sliding a tiny pair of knitted booties across the table. He stared at them for a long moment, then looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "Really?" he whispered. "Really," Priscilla confirmed, her own eyes wet. "We are going to be parents." Dominic came around the table so fast, he nearly knocked over his chair, pulling her into his arms and holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. They stood there in their kitchen, clinging to each other and crying happy tears, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this new chapter. Pregnancy agreed with Priscilla. She felt healthy and energetic through most of it, though the smell of certain soap scents made her nauseous. She turned those production runs over to her workers and focused on the administrative side of things. Dominic was protective to the point of being ridiculous, trying to prevent her from lifting anything heavier than a teacup. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she kept reminding him, but she was secretly touched by his concern. Their son was born in April of 1882, a healthy boy with a powerful set of lungs and his father's dark hair. They named him Daniel, and Dominic held him with such careful awe that Priscilla fell in love with her husband all over again. Being parents was harder and more wonderful than either of them had expected. Daniel was a demanding baby, wanting to be held constantly and waking frequently through the night. But watching Dominic pace their bedroom floor at 3 in the morning, murmuring nonsense to their son to soothe him, Priscilla felt a contentment deeper than any business success could provide. They hired a woman named Margaret to help with the baby and the house, which allowed Priscilla to stay involved with her business. She was careful not to overextend herself, working only part days for the first few months. But she had built a good team, and her workers stepped up to keep production running smoothly. Dominic cut back his hours too, wanting to be present for his family. He had good managers in place at both the saloon and hotel, and he trusted them to handle the day-to-day operations while he focused on the bigger picture and spent time with his wife and son. Daniel grew into a cheerful, curious toddler. By 1883, he was walking and getting into everything. Priscilla spent her days chasing after him while trying to manage her business, and she fell into bed exhausted every night. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from a full, purposeful life. She got pregnant again in the fall of 1883, and this time she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in May of 1884, a tiny thing with her mother's honey-colored hair and a surprisingly calm temperament. They named her Dorothea, Thea for short, and Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister. "Baby," he would say, pointing at her with awe. "My baby." "Our baby," Priscilla would correct gently. "You are the big brother, so you have to help take care of her." Daniel took this responsibility very seriously, bringing Thea his favorite toys and patting her head gently with his chubby toddler hands. The years passed in a blur of work and family and steady growth. By 1886, Priscilla's soap company was one of the largest employers in Portland, with 30 women on the payroll. She had expanded into other products, just as she had planned, offering lotions, perfumes, and specialized medicinal soaps. Her products were sold throughout the Pacific Northwest and California, and she had inquiries from as far away as Texas. Dominic had expanded too. He now owned 3 establishments in Portland, and he was considering opening a 4th in Salem. His reputation as a fair, honest businessman made his name valuable. People trusted Garrett's establishments to be clean, safe, and well-run. They had purchased another adjacent plot of land and expanded their house, adding a proper parlor and more bedrooms. The extra space proved necessary when Priscilla gave birth to twins in 1887, 2 more boys they named David and Douglas. The house that had felt spacious suddenly felt chaotic, full of children's voices and laughter and the constant activity of a large family. "We need a bigger house," Dominic said one morning, surveying the chaos of breakfast with 4 young children. "Or fewer children," Priscilla teased, though her hand instinctively went to her stomach. She was fairly certain she was pregnant again, though she had not told Dominic yet. "Never," Dominic said firmly. "I love our chaotic, noisy, wonderful family. But maybe a few more bedrooms would not be a bad idea." They designed and built an addition, creating a proper nursery and 2 more children's rooms. The timing was perfect, as their 5th child, another daughter they named Pauline, was born in early 1888. Priscilla was 33 now, Dominic was 35, and they had 5 children under the age of 6. Life was exhausting and messy and absolutely perfect. Priscilla had long since stopped being directly involved in daily soap production. focusing instead on management, product development, and business strategy. She had promoted 3 of her longest-term workers to supervisory positions, and they ran the manufactory so well that Priscilla sometimes joked she was barely necessary anymore. "You built something that does not depend entirely on you," Dominic pointed out. "That is the sign of a truly successful business." Dominic had done the same thing with his establishments. He had good managers who handled operations while he focused on growth strategy and maintaining the reputation and standards that made Garrett's name mean something. They had achieved everything they had dreamed of and more. They owned their land outright now. The loan paid off years early. They had successful businesses that supported not just their own family, but dozens of other families. They had a beautiful home and healthy children, and a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and deep love. One evening in the fall of 1889, after the children were finally asleep, Priscilla and Dominic sat on their porch watching the stars. Priscilla was leaning against her husband, his arm around her shoulders, and she found herself thinking about how far they had come. "You remember that first day we met?" she asked. "When I was stirring tallow behind the boarding house. I remember thinking you were the most determined person I had ever seen," Dominic said. "Doing work that most people would consider beneath them, doing it without complaint, focused entirely on your goal." "I remember thinking you were too handsome to be talking to me," Priscilla admitted. "I thought you must want something, because men that attractive do not just strike up conversations with desperate widows." Dominic laughed. "I did want something. I wanted to know you. From the first moment, I wanted to know everything about you. Did you ever imagine we would end up here?" Priscilla gestured at the house, the land, the manufactory building visible in the distance. "Did you think that day that we would build all this together?" "I hoped," Dominic said quietly. "I did not dare believe it, but I hoped. You made me want to be better, to work harder, to reach for bigger dreams than I had ever allowed myself before." He turned to look at her, and his eyes held all the love and tenderness of their years together. "You changed my life, Priscilla. You gave me everything that matters." "You gave me everything too," Priscilla replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a partner, a true partner who saw me as an equal. You gave me love and family and a future I could never have imagined. You believed in me when I barely believed in myself." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held years of partnership and passion and profound friendship. When they pulled apart, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "So would I," Priscilla whispered. "Every single moment." The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. Daniel started school, proving to be bright and curious like both his parents. Thea showed an early interest in her mother's business, always wanting to help mix ingredients or design labels. The twins were wild and energetic, keeping everyone on their toes, while Pauline was a sweet-natured child who loved books and quiet play. Priscilla had another child in 1891, a son they named Donovan, and Dominic joked that they were going to need to buy more land just to house their growing family. But he said it with pride and joy, delighting in the chaos and noise of their household. The soap company continued to grow. By the mid-1890s, it was operating at a scale Priscilla had never imagined possible. She was shipping products across the country, and she had opened a second manufactory in Salem to handle the demand. She employed over 100 women now, and she took care to maintain the fair treatment and good wages that had characterized her business from the start. Dominic's business empire had grown too. He owned 5 establishments in different Oregon towns, all run to the same high standards. He was known throughout the region as a businessman who could be trusted, who treated his employees well, and who contributed generously to his communities. They had become wealthy, though neither of them felt particularly changed by it. They still lived relatively simply, their luxuries being quality rather than ostentation. They had a comfortable home, good food, nice clothes, and the freedom to be generous. Priscilla regularly used her resources to help struggling women start their own businesses, offering no-interest loans and business mentorship. Dominic supported various community projects, from helping to fund a new school to supporting the volunteer fire brigade. In 1895, when Priscilla was 40 and Dominic was 42, they stood together at the edge of their property watching their children play. Daniel was 13 now, tall and serious, and already talking about wanting to study law. Thea was 11 and spending every spare moment at the manufactory, learning the business from the ground up. The twins were 8 and full of mischief, while Pauline was 7 and already an accomplished reader. Little Donovan was 4, the baby of the family, though Priscilla suspected there might be one more child in their future. "We did well," Dominic said, watching their children with a soft expression. "We did," Priscilla agreed. She slipped her hand into his, a gesture so familiar after all these years that it felt like breathing. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever regret it?" Dominic asked. "Giving up your original plan, the small plot of land for just yourself, the security you were working toward?" Priscilla thought about it seriously. "No," she said finally. "That plan was born from fear and loss. It was about protecting myself because I thought I could only rely on myself. But you taught me that I could rely on someone else. That partnership does not have to mean giving up who you are." She turned to look at her husband. "We built something so much bigger and better than what I could have built alone. Not just the businesses, but this family, this life. I have no regrets, Dominic, not a single one." Dominic pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Good. Because I have loved every moment of building this life with you. Every challenge we faced together, every victory we celebrated together. You are my partner in every sense of the word, and I fall more in love with you every day." They stood there together, watching their children and contemplating their shared past and future. The journey from that desperate widow stirring tallow behind a boarding house to the successful businesswoman and mother she was now seemed impossible, like something from a story rather than real life. But it had happened, one day at a time, one batch of soap at a time, one risk taken and one dream pursued. In 1897, Priscilla's oldest son Daniel graduated from secondary school with honors. He was accepted to study law at a university in San Francisco, and Priscilla felt both immensely proud and achingly sad as they prepared to send him away. "He will come back," Dominic assured her. "We raised him to know where home is." Daniel did come back, every summer and for holidays, full of stories about his studies and his life in the city. Thea continued working at the soap company, and by the time she was 16, she was managing entire departments. The girl had her mother's head for business and her father's people skills, a powerful combination. The twins showed less interest in the family businesses, but they were both mechanically inclined and fascinated by the new automobiles that were starting to appear. Dominic encouraged their interests, believing that each child should find their own path. Pauline wanted to be a teacher, and Donovan was still young enough that his interests changed weekly. In 1898, Priscilla discovered she was pregnant one more time, to her surprise and Dominic's delight. Their last child, a daughter they named Penelope, was born in early 1899 as the century was turning. Priscilla was 44, old for childbearing by the standards of the time, but she was healthy and the birth went smoothly. "Our miracle baby," Dominic called Penelope, holding her with the same wonder he had shown with Daniel 17 years earlier. As the new century arrived, Priscilla and Dominic found themselves looking back on over 20 years of marriage and partnership. They had built an empire from almost nothing. They had raised 7 children who were growing into good, capable people. They had employed and helped countless others along the way. "I have been thinking," Dominic said one evening in 1900, "about eventually stepping back. Not retiring completely, but letting the next generation start taking over." Priscilla nodded thoughtfully. "I have been thinking the same thing. Daniel will be finishing his law studies soon. Thea is more than capable of running the soap company. We could start transitioning responsibilities to them. And focus more on each other," Dominic added. "We have worked so hard for so long. Maybe it is time to enjoy what we built, to travel a little, to just be together without always worrying about the next business challenge." It was a good plan, and they began implementing it slowly over the next few years. Daniel returned from San Francisco in 1901 with his law degree and immediately became invaluable in managing the legal aspects of both business empires. Thea officially became president of Porter's Fine Soaps and Sundries in 1903, at the age of 19, though Priscilla remained chairman and advisor. The twins opened a machine shop together, working on automobiles and other mechanical devices. Pauline went to normal school to become a teacher. Donovan was showing an interest in hotel management, spending hours learning from the managers at his father's establishments. Little Penelope was still just a child, bright and curious, and clearly inheriting the family's business acumen even at age 4. Priscilla was 48 in 1903, Dominic was 50, and they began truly stepping back from daily operations. They took their first real vacation, traveling to San Francisco for 2 weeks. It felt strange at first, being away from the businesses and the children, but also liberating. "I had forgotten what it was like to just be us," Priscilla said one evening as they walked along the San Francisco waterfront. "Not parents, not business owners, just Dominic and Priscilla." "I like just being us," Dominic replied, pulling her close. "Though I love being all those other things too." They returned home refreshed and ready for this new phase of life. They remained involved in their businesses, but at a strategic level rather than operational. They spent more time with their younger children, particularly Penelope, who was growing up with much more of her parents' attention than her older siblings had received. They also spent more time on philanthropy. Priscilla established a fund to help women start businesses, offering both capital and mentorship. Dominic funded the construction of a community hall in Portland that offered meeting space, a small library, and rooms for various civic activities. In 1905, Daniel married a lovely woman he had met in San Francisco, another lawyer named Elizabeth. The wedding was grand and joyful, and Priscilla cried happy tears watching her firstborn start his own family. A year later, they welcomed their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas in honor of Priscilla's first husband. It felt right, honoring that part of her past even as she celebrated the future. Thea married in 1907 to a young man named Robert who worked in banking and understood business. He and Thea were partners in the same way Priscilla and Dominic had been, and Priscilla felt deeply satisfied knowing her daughter had found that kind of partnership. The younger children were still at home, though the twins were nearly grown. Donovan was showing real aptitude for hotel management, and Pauline had graduated from normal school and was teaching at the local elementary school. Penelope was 8 and already helping her mother with business correspondence, showing the same early maturity that Thea had displayed. Priscilla was 52 in 1907, and she sometimes marveled at how her life had turned out. She had survived loss and poverty and desperate uncertainty. She had built a business empire through sheer determination and hard work. She had found love with a partner who respected her ambitions and supported her dreams. She had raised 7 children who were all finding their own paths in the world. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked one evening. They were sitting on their porch again, a favorite place for important conversations. He was 54 now, with gray threading through his dark hair, but he was still strong and vital. "About how grateful I am," Priscilla said, "for all of it. The struggles and the successes, the challenges and the joys. It was all worth it to get here." "Here is pretty good," Dominic agreed, pulling her close. "Here is everything I ever wanted." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Around them was the evidence of everything they had built together. The house full of family, the successful businesses, the strong community ties, the love that had sustained them through everything. Priscilla thought back to that first meeting, to standing by her soap kettle smelling of tallow with her hair falling down, meeting a handsome stranger who would become the love of her life. She thought about all the choices they had made together, the risks they had taken, the support they had given each other. "I love you," she said, the words as natural as breathing after all these years. "I love you too," Dominic replied, kissing her softly. "Always have, always will." The years continued to flow by, bringing more grandchildren and continued success. By 1910, Priscilla and Dominic had essentially retired from active business management, though they remained majority owners and advisors. Daniel was managing all legal affairs for the family enterprises. Thea had expanded the soap company into regional markets, making Porter's fine soaps and sundries one of the most recognized brands in the West. The twins had a thriving machine shop and were starting to experiment with manufacturing automobile parts. Pauline was a beloved teacher who had recently married a fellow educator. Donovan had taken over management of the largest of Dominic's hotels and was doing an excellent job. Penelope, at 13, was already working summers at the soap company, following in her sister Thea's footsteps. Priscilla was 55 in 1910. Dominic was 57, and they were wealthy beyond anything they had imagined in those early days. But the wealth was not what mattered most. What mattered was the family they had created, the lives they had touched, the legacy they were building. "Do you remember buying that first bar of soap from me?" Priscilla asked Dominic one evening. They were having dinner alone, a rare occurrence with their large, extended family. "I remember thinking it was the best money I ever spent," Dominic replied with a grin. "Not because of the soap, though that was good, but because it gave me an excuse to keep talking to you." "I knew what you were doing," Priscilla admitted. "A man does not need 6 bars of soap all at once unless he has ulterior motives. Guilty as charged." Dominic reached across the table for her hand. "Best ulterior motives I ever had." They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in June of 1912 with a huge party that brought together their entire extended family and many friends and business associates. Priscilla looked around at the crowd, at her children and grandchildren, at the people who worked for their companies, at the friends they had made over the years, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she said to Dominic during a quiet moment, "for seeing me that day, for believing in me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for letting me," Dominic replied. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing but dreams and determination." "You had more than that," Priscilla corrected. "You had integrity and kindness and vision. You had everything that mattered." As they danced together at their anniversary celebration, Priscilla reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that widow stirring tallow behind a boarding house to this grandmother presiding over a family dynasty, the transformation seemed miraculous. But it had not been magic. It had been hard work and smart decisions and taking calculated risks. It had been supporting each other through doubts and challenges. It had been choosing love and partnership over fear and self-protection. Most of all, it had been about seeing opportunities and having the courage to pursue them. Priscilla had seen an opportunity in discarded tallow and turned it into a business empire. Dominic had seen an opportunity in a struggling saloon and turned it into multiple thriving establishments. Together, they had seen an opportunity in each other and turned it into a love that had sustained them through everything. The years moved on, bringing the inevitable changes of time. Some were joyful, like more grandchildren and the continued success of the family businesses. Some were difficult, like when Mrs. Henderson, Priscilla's first landlady, passed away in 1914. Priscilla attended the funeral and found herself crying for the woman who had shown kindness to a desperate widow so many years ago. "She gave me a chance when I had nothing," Priscilla told Dominic. "I owe her so much. Then we will honor her memory by continuing to give chances to people who need them," Dominic said, and they endowed a scholarship for young women in Mrs. Henderson's name. By 1915, Priscilla was 60 and Dominic was 62. They were grandparents 7 times over, and Thea was pregnant with what would be their 8th grandchild. The businesses were thriving under the next generation's management. The family had become one of the most respected in Portland, known for their business acumen and their generosity. Priscilla sometimes thought about the woman she had been at 23, newly widowed and desperate, and she felt such compassion for that younger self. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be all right, that the struggle was temporary, that joy and success and love were waiting just around the corner. But maybe the struggle had been necessary. Maybe she had needed to learn that she could survive on her own, could build something from nothing, before she could truly appreciate the partnership she found with Dominic. Maybe they both had needed to prove to themselves that they could achieve their dreams before they could fully commit to building a shared dream. "What would you tell your younger self?" she asked Dominic one evening. "If you could go back to that day we met, what would you say?" Dominic thought about it. "I would tell him to buy more soap," he said with a grin, then grew more serious. "No, I would tell him that the best investments are in people, not things. That the woman stirring that kettle is going to change his life in ways he cannot imagine. That love and partnership are worth more than any business success." He squeezed her hand. "What would you tell yours?" "I would tell her that it is okay to trust again," Priscilla said softly. "That not every man is like Thomas, that real partnership is possible. That she is stronger than she knows, but that strength does not mean she has to do everything alone." She smiled. "And I would tell her to buy that leather ledger he is going to give her for Christmas, because she is going to fill it with records of a success she cannot yet imagine." They sat together in companionable silence, comfortable after all these years. The house was quiet, Penelope having gone to spend the evening with friends, and it was just the two of them like in the early days. "You remember what you said to me the night you proposed?" Priscilla asked. "You said your dreams and my dreams would be all tangled together." "I remember," Dominic confirmed. "You were right. I cannot even separate them anymore. Everything we built together. Every success was shared. Every challenge was faced as partners." Priscilla turned to look at her husband. "That is what real love is, I think. Not just romantic feelings, though we have plenty of those still, but being so interwoven with another person that you cannot imagine your life without them in it." "I cannot imagine my life without you," Dominic said seriously. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Priscilla. You made me better than I would have been alone. You made me reach higher, work harder, care more. Everything good in my life traces back to you." "And everything good in mine traces back to you," Priscilla replied. "We saved each other, I think. We gave each other a reason to build something bigger than ourselves." As they grew older, they focused more on legacy. They wanted to ensure that the businesses they had built would continue to provide good jobs and fair treatment for generations. They wanted their children and grandchildren to understand the value of hard work and integrity. They wanted to give back to communities that had supported them. In 1918, the world was in turmoil with the Great War ending in Europe. But Priscilla and Dominic, now 63 and 65, found themselves largely insulated by their age and location. None of their sons had been called to fight, being either too young or in essential industries. But they felt the impact of the war nonetheless, seeing the changes it brought to the world. "Everything is different now," Dominic observed one evening. "The world our grandchildren will grow up in is not the world we knew." "Maybe that is good," Priscilla said. "Our world was harsh in many ways. Maybe the next generation will build something better." They lived to see it. The 1920s brought prosperity and change. Automobiles became common, electricity reached even rural areas, and women got the right to vote, something that made Priscilla cry with joy when she cast her first ballot in 1920. "I wish I could have had this when I was starting out," she told Dominic. "The ability to participate fully in civic life, to have my voice counted." "You found other ways to make your voice count," Dominic pointed out. "Through your business, through the women you employed and helped, through the example you set. You changed lives, Priscilla, with or without the vote." "But it is better with," she said firmly, and he could not argue with that. Their children were all settled and successful. Daniel was a respected lawyer with a growing family. Thea had expanded the soap company into national markets and was being written about in business journals as an example of successful female entrepreneurship. The twins manufactured automobile parts that were shipped across the country. Paulin had become a school principal. Donovan owned and operated 3 hotels. Penelope, the youngest at 23, had just graduated from college with a business degree and was starting her own enterprise importing specialty goods. In 1922, Priscilla was 67 and Dominic was 69. They were great-grandparents now, with Daniel's oldest children starting families of their own. They had slowed down considerably, spending most of their time at home or with family, but they were content. "We did good," Dominic said one evening, echoing words from years before. "We did," Priscilla agreed. "Better than good. We built something that will last." She was thinking not just of the businesses, though those would continue. She was thinking of the family they had created, the values they had instilled, the example they had set of what partnership and hard work could achieve. In 1925, they celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The celebration was smaller than their 30th anniversary had been, but more intimate and precious. Priscilla looked around at the faces of the people who existed because she and Dominic had found each other, had chosen each other, had built a life together, and she felt complete. No regrets. Dominic asked her quietly as they sat together watching the family. "Not a single one," Priscilla confirmed. "You?" "Only that I did not buy more soap that first day so I would have more excuses to talk to you," he said with a grin. Priscilla laughed, the sound still bright and young despite her age. "You bought plenty. You bought a bar every week for months." "Best money I ever spent," Dominic repeated and kissed her softly. They lived several more years in contentment, watching their legacy grow and flourish. Priscilla passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1928 at the age of 73, surrounded by family. Dominic held her hand as she slipped away, and his last words to her were the same words he had spoken so many times before. "I love you, Priscilla. Always have, always will." Dominic followed her 6 months later, unable to imagine a world without his partner. He was 76, and he went peacefully, sitting in the chair on the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking and dreaming and planning their life together. Their funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives they had touched. Their children spoke of parents who had shown them what real partnership looked like, what integrity in business meant, what it took to build something lasting. The workers from the soap company and the hotels spoke of employers who had treated them fairly and helped them when they struggled. Community leaders spoke of philanthropists who had given generously and expected nothing in return. But perhaps the most powerful tribute came from an old woman who had been one of Priscilla's first employees, hired when she was a desperate young widow with children to feed. She stood before the crowd and said simply, "Mrs. Garrett saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. She gave me a chance when no one else would. She changed my life and the lives of my children and grandchildren. The world is better because she was in it." That was the legacy Priscilla and Dominic left behind. Not just successful businesses or accumulated wealth, though those things were real and significant, but the lives they had touched, the opportunities they had created, the example they had set of what two people could build together through love, hard work, and unwavering partnership. The businesses they founded continued for generations. Porter's Fine Soaps and Sundries remained a major regional brand well into the 20th century. The Garrett hotels and saloons evolved with the times, but maintained the standards of quality and integrity that Dominic had established. The machine shop the twins started grew into a significant manufacturing concern. But more than the businesses, the family they created carried forward their values. Generation after generation of Garretts and Porters went into the world with the understanding that success came through hard work and integrity, that you took care of your employees and your community, that real partnership meant supporting each other's dreams, and that love was the foundation of everything worthwhile. The story of Priscilla Porter and Dominic Garrett became family legend, told to children and grandchildren as an example of what was possible when two people found each other and chose to build a life together. The poor widow who made soap from tallow and saved enough to buy land. The cowboy who bought a bar of soap every week as an excuse to talk to her. The partnership they built that transformed into love and then into a dynasty that lasted for generations. It was a love story, but it was also a story of determination, of seeing opportunity and having the courage to pursue it, of building something lasting through hard work and smart decisions. It was the story of the American West, of people who came with nothing and created prosperity through their own efforts. It was the story of what real partnership could achieve when two people trusted each other completely and worked together toward shared dreams. And it all started with a woman stirring tallow behind a boarding house, and a man who saw her potential when she barely saw it herself. It started with soap and determination, and a cowboy who bought a bar every week, not because he needed it, but because he wanted an excuse to keep coming back to the woman who would become his whole world. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the soap empire or the hotel chain or the accumulated wealth. Not even the large family and the generations that followed. What mattered was that two people had found each other in a difficult time and place, had chosen each other despite all the reasons not to, and had built a life together that was richer and fuller than anything they could have achieved alone. They had loved each other completely, supported each other absolutely, and created something that lasted long after they were gone. And that, in the end, was everything.